You're now watching Sports Bettor's Paradise on the BetRivers Network.
All right, Jimmy out along with Paul Stone each and every week here on the Sports Bettor's Paradise, talking about our handicapping approaches to college basketball. And before we do that, Paul, and get to the particular process that you have, you know, Nick Saban, it's all about the process now. So we'll get to that in just a little bit. But first of all, I like to jog back to some things that we previously talked about, and the big win, the emotional win, when you use up a chunk of that emotion, there's that much less in the tank moving forward. The court rush fade, if you will, and we'll have to see if maybe that one in Winston-Salem might have been the last one. It was one in Itta-Bena, Mississippi, though, as they got off the schneid and won their first game. But, I mean, this week with Notre Dame beating Wake Forest outright after their court rush, Paul, it has been really an extreme angle. It's been very profitable fading these teams coming off of these emotional wins.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I mean, over the course of a 30, 35, even, I guess, a 40-game schedule for some teams, there's no way you're going to have the same amount of emotional gas game in and game out. And it only stands to reason that the further you get along in the schedule, I think the first day of college basketball was way back on November 6th. So you think the season started November 6th. They started practicing full-time a month before that. So they've been grinding for a long time. So I think the further you get along in the process being the schedule, I think it lends itself to these types of ebbs and flows and highs and lows. You know, you can't bring the same amount of intensity every game. You either bring a little bit more, a little bit less. And off those big wins, it seems that teams don't quite show up in the same manner the next time out.
Yeah, we saw over the weekend also on Sunday where Creighton, and talking to my friends in Omaha, the best atmosphere they've ever had at a game in Omaha, Nebraska. Well, they lose handily, gate to wire, never in it, against St. John's as they lost by a double digits. St. John's playing themselves onto the bubble. Well, next week we'll certainly talk a lot about bubble teams. But, you know, you and I, who've been handicapping college football and basketball for so long, and anybody you talk to, because I've never talked to a coach, former coach, player, former player that said, no, you can't have your A-plus intensity, focus, emotion level every week. It's impossible. But what sport, Paul, do you think it's about the same? Or do you think because it's a longer schedule, these emotional angles, these highs and lows, is it college basketball, or is it stronger in college football?
You know, I don't want to be a prisoner of the moment, Jimmy, but I think maybe college basketball, and I think the season's longer. I think the impact, a lot of these victories and these surprises are happening on the underdog's home floor, and the energy that you create from that home crowd, I think, is part of it too. That these teams are coming in here with a target on their back, and now they're coming into a hostile environment, and everybody's charged up. And I think it's harder to play on the road in college basketball for the most part than it is in college football, all things being equal. So I think it presents itself more in college basketball.
Yeah, and you're answering my question for me as well, and that's why too, because it's the home crowd impacts the game more in basketball than it does in football. Just wonder, they're closer. I mean, it's just the fuel for the home team and the intimidation or the distraction for the visiting team, and they're college-age players. Even though they're much older these days in college basketball, they're still college basketball. So let's get to your process and one of the things that you do that's sort of unique to your process, your handicapping of college basketball. Look, some of us are old enough to remember waiting for that newspaper to hit the pavement in the morning, go on to Sports Bet, give me the latest line. All right, let's check out the lines, all right? Well, some of us now will get up in the morning, whether we go to our sports book and get a sheet, or we in bed and let me see what the lines are, or get our cup of coffee and see what it is. Some people the evening before, and these lines are out. You start ahead of all of that. Tell us when your process starts to you handicapping college basketball.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say, first of all, Jimmy, that I think it's clear when there's more than 360 teams in a sport, even if you're not studying or handicapping them all, it's critical, it's paramount to have a high level of organization. I mean, when you're doing something that large, the more organized you are, the better. And I think much of that organization centers around staying ahead of the game, looking ahead in some manner or fashion. By my count, this Saturday, March 2nd, we're recording on Leap Day, Thursday, February 29th. So this Saturday, March 2nd, there are 138 bettable college basketball games. That includes the added games. That's a whole lot of games. In my mind, it's impractical to think that a person could start on Friday afternoon or Lord forbid, wake up early Saturday morning and adequately handicap even a small percentage of that many games. In my opinion, you need several days, even up to 6 days, 7 days to properly prepare, for such an extensive schedule of games. So I'm going to go over my process. It's not going to take but a couple of minutes, but if you want to jump in at any point, please do. But how I try to, kind of my process of how I try to stay a step ahead of the college basketball schedule handicapping curve, if you will. As with most things, there are obviously many ways to approach this exercise. This is just one person's approach. A person may choose to utilize all the elements of my process, bits and pieces of it, or none of it. But at the very least, I'm going to try to provide some food for thought and ideas for how to make a large schedule of games that might appear monstrous, seem to be more manageable. So first of all, each Sunday, I'm going to start out, I'm an old-time guy, so I'm going to print out hard copies of the schedule of games for the following 7 days. So on Sunday, I'm going to print out Monday through Sunday's games. I'm not going to go over every fine detail of how I do it. That would be time prohibitive. But what I'll do, first of all, is I'm going to look at each day chronologically, start out by looking at Monday, and I do this on Sunday. Look at Monday's games, Tuesday's games, Wednesday's games, maybe spend 15 minutes just kind of glancing at the schedule. And I'm going to use a highlighter. I'm going to emphasize sides that I might consider betting. I might additionally use a pencil next to those games that I might be considering just to jot down brief pieces of information supporting my reasoning. Those notes could include injury information, scheduling dynamics, and even details from an earlier meeting between the schools. On these highlighted games, I'm going to go ahead and make my early, even though they're going to probably play in some cases one game before this next game, I'm going to go ahead and make my projected point spread in my mind, jot it down for that game. Then I'm going to reference KenPom for his margin of victory to see what his line is. And then I also use power ratings generated by Sonny Moore, look at his power ratings and see what his number would be. And from my line and from those two sources, I'm going to establish what I anticipate the opening line is going to be in that game. I'm also going to jot down on games, especially ones that I really like and I really anticipate that I might bet. I'm going to jot down my play price on certain teams. I might project the line to be -4, but I might say, hey, I'm going to play it up to -4.5. I might put, like Seattle University -4.5 or less, and might add the word firm, meaning I don't have any flexibility. If it's 5 or more, I'm going to have the discipline. I'm not going to play it. So I kind of set some parameters for myself instead of trying to go through it all the day before or the day of the game. Just a little bit more left here. I'll say, that when you're doing, this kind of front end legwork 2 or 3 days ahead, maybe even up to 7 days like I do in advance, you obviously have to be flexible. Game results and injuries are just two of the elements that could certainly alter your perspective on a certain game. So you have to keep those things in mind. Things can change. Things are fluid. Don't just, put your heels in the ground and say, I'm playing this game come heck or high water.
Paul,
So,
let me ask you when you are looking for maybe, your strong opinions on, do you have a number in mind? Or do you just, it varies from week to week. Do you have an anticipated number that what you're going to settle on? Is it 8 to 10 games a week in college basketball? Is it more? Is it less? Or talk about a number, because I think a lot of our listeners kind of have the amount of games they want to bet, any night or any week.
Yeah, I mean, the way it works out for me, and it just naturally does, I try not to force anything. I don't
Okay.
need the action necessarily. So on Monday, a smaller slate of games, I usually have 0 or 1 plays. On Tuesday or Wednesday, I might go to 3 or 4, anywhere from 2 to 4, say. Thursday, I might have up to 5 on Thursday. I bet a lot of Western Athletic Conference
Okay.
games, and they play on Thursday. Friday, I'll either have 0 or 1. And then Saturday, typically going to be anywhere from about 6 to 8. And then Sunday, maybe 2 to 4 again. So it kind of, based on the number of games and kind of the leagues that I concentrate on, it kind of naturally works out that way.
Yeah, on my radio show, I release picks every day, and the leagues that I follow the most. Mondays are really tough. I mean, you have maybe 1 to 3 of the games that fall into the Power Six, plus a couple of local ones like the Southland around here in Mountain West. That I repeat, but Tuesdays and Wednesdays are I gotta. I mean, I might give out as many as 6. I might give out as few as 2 or 3. So I was just curious about if there was a number, but it's just down. So when you were in school, Paul, you had that term paper. Your professor said it could be 20 words or 20 pages, Paul. I mean, it's just but that's the thing, and that's the beauty of the podcast too. You're not restricted. Like radio, I mean, it is a hard clock. You got your 8 to 10 minute segment. You got to get out and run some commercials. Same thing with television. So you've highlighted 3 games for this weekend that kind of have stood out to you in your process. Let's first start in the Big 12, where boy, that West Virginia team down 25 in a Little Apple, in Manhattan, stormed all the way back to get Kansas State. Well, you can't beat Tang and K-State in overtime. 7-0 last year. I mean, this year it's 5-0 last year. But now Texas Tech. And, Paul, I got to tell you, you highlighted Texas in the past. There ain't many that could go into that building with that venom and that electricity and just walk out of there with a rout. That was impressive. Texas Tech getting off the mat a little bit, going against West Virginia, who appears they're going to have an opening for a job, but you're projecting the line to be Texas Tech 4.5 on the road here.
Yeah, first of all, West Virginia, they've lost 6 of their last 7 games, but the Mountaineers, clearly a different team in Morgantown. They're 4-3 at home during Big 12 play, already have defeated both Texas and Kansas on their home floor. You look at this Texas Tech team, and you're talking about that game this past Tuesday at home in Lubbock against Texas, which was an 81-69 victory by the Longhorns. Texas Tech, they were without their 7-foot forward, Warren Washington, and they are not the same team without Washington. Clearly their lack of size hurt them significantly against Texas. The Longhorns out-rebounded them 44-30. Washington is iffy to play this Saturday in Morgantown. And if he's not able to go, West Virginia's best player is their big man, Jesse Edwards, 14 points a game, 8 rebounds. I think Edwards could have a big game, especially if Washington is absent. But in any case, I like West Virginia plus the points. Again, I project the line to be 4.5. I'd take West Virginia up to about 3.5 plus over Texas Tech.
And you like it regardless whether or not the Texas Tech a big man is playing, but that certainly affects
Correct.
your how much you like it. All right, let's go to the Big Ten. Number 1 cover team in all of college basketball. 362 of them, man. You're number 1 out of 362. You're doing something. They finally did lose and lose badly to the number in Lincoln against Nebraska. Nebraska undefeated, straight up, and against the spread at home in conference play this year. But the Minnesota Golden Gophers, they backdoored the game against Illinois on Wednesday night, and now they host Penn State. Minnesota 7 over Penn State against the number 1 ATS team in the country, Minnesota, who's 24-4 against the spread.
Yeah, you referenced the losses, the back-to-back road losses by Minnesota at Nebraska and Illinois. So they come into this game on a 2-game losing streak. They desperately need a victory, does Minnesota, if they're going to maintain any hopes of an at-large berth in the NCAA tournament. And they're kind of certainly on the outside looking in now, but they do at least have a pathway. But they need to beat this Penn State team on Saturday, this Saturday the 2nd. You mentioned the fact that the Gophers have been a cash cow this season, 24-4 against the spread. And I still don't think the line maker has really caught up to what this Minnesota team's power rating should be. You look at this Penn State team, their head coach, Mike Rhodes, he revealed early last week that their top scorer, guard Kanye Clary, he's no longer with the team. He said the coach said he made a decision to move on. So Clary averaged almost 17 points a game. A lot of scoring there. So it's certainly, even though some have kind of said it's addition by subtraction, you have to miss that type of scoring. So I think Minnesota, a team, again, that has outperformed expectations all year, I think they're going to win this one by double digits over Penn State on Saturday.
There used to be the RPI. Now it's the NET. And I know Brad Brownell of Clemson had some critical words about the NET, but it is the one metric that the selection committee uses. In Minnesota at a 75 right now is not. That's not at large territory. So you want to get it's a must win for them in this spot. So a little motivation in a favorite role there. Let's go to the ACC. And you're talking about home and away. Well, here's a couple of teams here. And we mentioned Wake Forest, the Court Storm, and they get beat outright by 6 as a 6.5-point favorite. Notre Dame, the improving Notre Dame team with Shrewsbury. Now they go to Blacksburg here, and Virginia Tech. Home and away. Virginia Tech is 12-2 at home, away from Winston-Salem. The Demon Deacons are just 2-8. You still think you might be able to get a couple of points in this game?
Yeah, I think I'm going to get at least one. I think Wake's going to be a road favorite here. I'm going to say -2 Wake. You look at this Virginia Tech team, they don't exactly enter the game with a full head of steam. Lost their last 2 games, both on the road, both by double digits. But again, I like the Hokies to rebound here. You mentioned it, this Wake team, not the same team on the road. They've lost 7 of their 8 conference games away from Winston-Salem. This past Saturday, February 24th, they beat Duke at home, 8th-ranked Duke. The court storming game, as we mentioned. Then, as you also alluded to, they then go to Notre Dame this Tuesday, February 26th. Lose there in South Bend off that Duke victory. I just think the Hokies here, I think they're going to get a victory. They're better at home. Wake, not that good on the road. Pretty simple approach, but I like Virginia Tech. Hopefully getting small points. I would probably take Virginia Tech pick or better on Saturday over Wake Forest.
I like that one a lot as well. And back to your process, stronger, you're giving us 3 home teams. Stronger consideration for home teams this year. It does seem like they are covering more than usual. It's we both agree there's no bigger home court or field advantage in the major sports than college basketball. And do you looking for stronger consideration when you go through your process, Paul?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I mean, I primarily play underdogs, and especially early in the conference schedule and early in the college basketball season period, played a lot of home underdogs. What happened, though, and we talked about it on one of the earlier podcasts, the home underdogs in some of these conferences, the first several weeks of the season, they were just printing money. Yeah. And the line maker's not just going to sit back and let that happen. So if you just use pure power ratings, you would see a team +6, and then the line would open, and it'd only be +3. So They were skewing their numbers and making you pay a tariff to take those home teams. But, yeah, underdogs, certainly my process is more heavily slanted towards the underdog, and even more specifically, I like to take home underdogs when the price is right.
Has to be this year. I mean, because it's the most top 10 teams that have lost to unranked teams. 95% of them are on the road. It's been the worst record overall for ranked teams in college basketball. So no doubt about that. You got to get it's and I've noticed that as well. Wait a minute, I should be getting more here in this spot traditionally, and they're still cashing in on a lot of those each and every week. We do it. Next week, we'll be getting into the final weekend of regular season play for the power conferences. We'll talk about those bubble teams, huh? Gotta win doesn't mean gotta bet, I guess. So anyway, for Paul Stone, I'm Jimmy Ott, each and every week on the Sports Bettor's Paradise on the BetRivers Network.